Since anyone can produce pretty much any content with AI nowadays, I'm recommending to my clients that they develop white papers. White papers are a very helpful technical type of document that really illustrates that you're authoritative and expert, that you've thought through problems, that you have solutions, that you know what people are looking for in a particular domain. White papers are just super, super helpful assets. But, I did have a client this week say to me, I had to go look up what white papers are because I don't think I've ever read one. I don't know what a good one looks like. And so I thought I would take a little time to make a video about what a white paper is and what it isn't. So first of all, I wanted to say that white papers are not sales pitches. I know that we look at white papers as a way to generate leads, to be a lead magnet, to attract people. It does a lot of that work for sure, but you don't want it to look and feel like a sales asset because the readers of white papers are usually more technical people that are looking for deeper answers than what they would find perhaps on a website or with a casual web search. You really don't want someone to read it and feel like they're being sold to, even though white papers are sales pitches. That's the hard thing about writing a good white paper. You want someone to feel like they got something out of it, like they learned and they were helped with, a solution to their problem, but you don't want them getting a couple paragraphs in and going, this is just a sales pitch. You want to get to the end and have them get to your sales pitch and they go, oh, actually, this is really interesting. I want to talk to these people. And it takes a lot of craftsmanship to be able to do that in a white paper. I've written a lot of white papers and I've had to fix and rewrite white papers as well. So let's just talk about high level what a white paper is. So it's really meant to educate or persuade through evidence and reasoning, not through product hype. You want to really make sure it doesn't look or feel like a marketing brochure or a solution brief. Those can be helpful at the right time, but like a solution guide or a solution brief that kind of looks over your product, super helpful piece of content. You should absolutely have it. But someone who clicks a link to read a white paper, they don't want to know about your product so much. They want to understand, okay, there's a problem that's interesting, compelling, or a problem that I'm facing, and they want to make sure that they're not crazy. So they're looking for someone else who's like, yeah, that person understands this problem too. And maybe they have an answer or a solution to this problem. So a white paper is typically like 6 to 15 pages, depending on, how many graphs or images you might be using or your use of space. But typically I'll write white papers that are 10 to 15 pages. And that's kind of like a meaty enough document that it's not going to be some sort of like casual drive-by reader. It's going to be somebody who really knows what they're doing, what they're talking about. And in this, current climate, you really want to be attracting people who can either influence a buying decision or make a buying decision directly. So you want your white paper to just like cut through the crap and just go, hey, we know who you are, we know what you're about, and we want to get to business. So typically in a white paper, it'll start off with like an executive summary that kind of just provides a high level overview of what the following content is all about. So you want to make sure that like you're addressing this person right up front. The executive summary, it's kind of like a cultural or a best practice, but really what it comes down to is imagine you're handing this white paper to an executive who doesn't have the time to read it all. But if the summary is compelling enough, they're going to, start digging through your paper. So you want to have a good executive summary. Think of it as a hook in your social media post or a great headline that gets somebody to click. So your white paper should always summarize what you're going to talk about in the paper and then try to be compelling enough without being hypey in any way. You just want to provide just a real description using the language that the reader understands and cares about, and just say, this is the situation, this is what this paper is about. Most of the time I'm writing a white paper to get the reader to say, I actually want to try this product. The way that I typically get there is I'll look for stats or insights. Perhaps my client will have some first-party insights or unique data that we can share, and we can kind of exploit that and make that kind of the centerpiece of the first section of the white paper. So you want to offer something compelling so the reader feels like they're going to learn something in this white paper. And then you want to describe sort of an industry overview or, why this problem is important. You want some high level information, not high level as in trivial or top of funnel or something like that. High level as in 30% of companies that are in this space typically face blah, blah, blah. And then the next big chunk of your white paper should focus on that problem. Just go deep into the problem. Why does the problem exist? Why is it actually important? What are the various reasons that it's important to different stakeholders or industry experts or whatever it is? You just really want to define and articulate the problem. Sometimes people are reading a white paper because they don't have enough information themselves. They're looking for an expert to help them know what language to use or even to frame up the problem in a way that they can articulate it to somebody else. And then once you get past the problem section, you want to get into the solutions part of the problem. So it's like a response to the problem, but it should never be like our product is the solution. That you save for the end. What you really should do is describe your product in a general way. For example, let's say you're in the identity and access management space and you describe a problem for one part of the industry, and then you'll say, to solve this problem, you really need an identity solution that does X, Y, and Z. You need to be able to control access for these types of systems. These types of people need to be able to use this product. You kind of just describe your product in a general or abstract way without sounding salesy, because ultimately, you want your product to be the inevitable conclusion at the end of the white paper. Also, you don't want to say anything about you as a brand or your platform or anything like that. Generally, in the white paper, I try to avoid any reference to authorship. It's always like a third party. So we're never going to say, we recommend this or we have done this, unless it's a case study and you're going to actually talk about your experience. Or if the white paper is clearly authored by a person or a group of people who are clearly experts, and they're not there as employees of a company, they are there as experts in the industry. Try to avoid a lot of the first person language and try to bring in citations from other companies. Obviously, you don't want to really lean on your competitors for research, but you do want to look outwardly for data that you can cite or frameworks you can reference or any sort of structured arguments that are compelling in the market. Even if they're not your own, it's good to present them in the white paper. Again, you want your white paper to be more of an objective type of document. So when someone reads it, they're going to go, oh, I'm surprised to see this company talking about these other ideas, or I'm glad that I'm getting exposure to all these different perspectives, on the problem or the solution. Your white paper should feel that way, like you're just helping someone to learn. And you don't want to do a apples to oranges or even comparing your product to a competing product. You don't want to do any of that in a white paper, unless the white paper is specifically about some unique feature that you have that your competition doesn't. That's a pretty rare situation. Another thing about doing it this way is that you want to develop and build trust. So when someone's reading a white paper, they should never feel like at some point you're just gonna bait and switch them and be like, haha, I got you. That was a sales pitch the whole time, Readers, especially technical or executive audiences, are time starved and very cynical, and they hear pitches all the time. They get tons of emails about this kind of whatever the product is that you're trying to sell. So when they get that kind of sense that this is just a glorified sales pitch, they're out. They're not going to keep the document. They're not going to send it to anyone. You really want to be helpful for that audience. Your goal is trust, not conversion. You can do all the conversion stuff before people get to the white paper, and we can talk about that in another video about how we generate leads online that get to our white papers and generate business. But a good white paper should build credibility and authority. It shouldn't be persuasive or influential. It should just be like educational, helpful, and guiding for the reader. You want to make a compelling case for something so that readers want to learn more on their own. And if you need to learn more about that, we have a whole series at bettersalescontent.com all about technical buyers so you can better understand them. Also, structure matters. You want to use format to guide people, not to sell them. You want to start with, like I said, problems and insights, layer on evidence, and then maybe at the end, you're going to talk about how your company addresses it, but it's not going to be like, our product does blah, blah, blah. You can say something like, we've made a product that addresses this problem. Here is where it's been useful. Here's data like from case studies. Here's how we've approached the problem. It's not going to be something like, our product has this feature and that feature and it's great. You should try it. Go sign up for a free trial or a demo. Call our sales team. That is not what your white paper should do. You don't want to get into features and benefits. You want to get into how your product addresses the problem being described in the white paper. You want to treat the white paper more like a work of journalism or analysis, not like a marketer. So you want to ask yourself, like, would someone outside of my company find this genuinely useful or thought-provoking? And if it wouldn't pass as a guest article in a respected industry publication, it's probably too pitchy. Finally, just a final takeaway here. If your audience learns nothing new from a white paper, they're never going to come back to you. The whole point is that they learned something, they got a new way of articulating a problem or a solution because of your white paper. And it's called a white paper because it builds trust, and it's kind of like a promise not to sell, even though it is selling. It's just very, 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 very subtle selling. It's selling through intellectual or academic or professional influence, but you're never actively doing the work of sales. A strong, useful white paper earns attention for the next white paper or the next interaction they have with your brand. So I think that's pretty much everything I have to say about white papers. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments or send me an email at anthony@edifycontent.com. We write white papers, technical white papers all the time. It's something we're really good at, and our white papers produce great results. So I'd be happy to talk to you about the kind of work that we do if you need any of that help.